record that over there, and hopefully that's all working. Let me grab a link for that. I'm just going to go through this whole procedure here. And for those who are referring to things later or need to, there is a YouTube link. And that's streaming, and I'll record it, and all these things all happening at once. Try to get it all right. Let's see, get into presenter mode. Got my tea ready. A bunch of people joining. Looks like we're almost in business. Awesome. Hopefully, there's only so many more times we've got to go through all this fun and excitement. I do appreciate those of you who have cameras on. We're going to do some introductions in a moment, and we're going to try to keep them relatively quick. But I do appreciate you having cameras so I can kind of get to know who people are, because chances are we will meet again. And at some point, if we haven't already met in person, I've met a couple of people from the class, but not a lot of people in person, unfortunately. Maybe next semester in Game Dev 1, maybe eventually in computer graphics for game programming, or computer graphics for games, or game architecture, or one of those courses. Sooner or later, we will likely cross paths in person, and that will be very exciting, or at least totally different than we are experiencing this as we are today and tomorrow, today and Friday, and so on and so on and so on. Got to warm my hands up. Everybody cold? How's it cold where you are? Probably a lot of you, half of you. If I made a guess based on the last class, I'm guessing half of you are in Troy, but we'll see. So as you introduce yourselves, there'll be a couple of opportunities. I want to know what your concentration is and whether you're on campus or not. And if you're not in Eastern Standard Time Zone, let me know. I know some people are spread across the globe, and we'll try to make accommodations for all that sort of thing. So let's see, roughly 3, 12, 14, 15. So we're almost at 16 people. And I think this is the section with 20. The morning section is the more full one. We have 27 people in the morning. So lucky you all, afternoon, the late risers. So, okay, as I was saying, I don't know if you're tuning in late. All these lectures are recorded. They're streamed. I stream them directly to YouTube. They are on my YouTube channel, but they are not advertised, or they're unlisted, but there will be links in LMS to the videos, so you can go back and watch them at double speed, triple speed, whatever you need to do. If you say, make notes of what time it was when we were talking about something. If there's like some text, some programming, some code up on the screen that you might need to refer to, that's always fun to have. So you can, if you miss a lecture, you can always catch up on it on YouTube. That'll be around. So we build these classes as sort of asynchronous, just in case, especially for the folks who are in different time zones and that sort of stuff. So I guess tuning in via Discord is the preferable one, so that we have options to have more interaction and actually kind of connect. You can ask questions. I'll be keeping track. I try to keep an eye out. I have 3 monitors. So if I'm looking over here, it's because I'm looking at the grid of people, and maybe I should move my, I don't know, I have to angle and things. I'm trying to do it, look official today. So I've got the Discord comments over there, so I can watch if you want to ask any questions. I'm just kind of parked over in the general 2021 spring channel. You can type your comments, or you can have your microphone on, shout your answer out. Or if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to try to keep track of over on that screen. Keep an eye out for YouTube live chat comments. A million things going on at the same time. So, but Discord will be where we, have conversations, especially offline ones. You'll find, I'm going to list some office hours and things, but seeing as we're all kind of stuck indoors, or I'm stuck indoors at least, uh, pretty accessible. We'll just say it's the office hours, but what do I have to do other than sit by my computer all day? All right, so get that out of the way. So hopefully this is intro to game programming. Big joke, always like, okay, hope I'm in the right spot, right time. But yeah, this is the one more version of the remote edition. Getting kind of used to it now, unfortunately. So this is third. Let's see, did it over the summer, did it in the fall, did it last spring. So getting kind of used to this. Getting into a little bit of a routine. If I start to go too fast, if I ramble, if I go on and on, let me know. Feel free to interrupt me. I am live, and there's a reason for doing this live. If you wanted to just watch the recording, I can give you this morning's one. You can watch that. But this, hopefully, the point of this is that it is live, and we can have some sort of interaction. I think I have it set right now. So even if you're not being recorded, you're not showing up in the YouTube video. I believe it's also set up so that your audio doesn't show up in the YouTube video. So you're not actually recorded. So if you're watching this after the fact, you may see, you get to the point where we're doing introductions. I apologize, but you're going to see me sitting there going like, ha, 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 when the people who are actually talking are not going to be on there. And that's, I don't know if it's protecting privacy or anything, but that's just the way that it's sort of set up right now. So let's talk, mostly today, we're going to talk a little bit about what we're going to cover in the course, kind of go through some expectations and grading and what the projects are going to be, a little bit of background, a little bit of, kind of kickstart things going, what you should all expect out of the course, what I expect from you. It is pretty broad. This is, pretty much everyone in GSAS takes this course sooner or later. It's one of these kind of core foundational courses. So it's going to be a very, very broad background of folks here. Everyone from, programmers to artists to management to communications to narrative to sound and so on and so on. And also we do tend to have a couple of students from outside GSAS as well. I try to open it up, especially when it's offered in the fall and the spring, but even, fall and whatchamacallit, it's the Arch, but chances are we'll have a couple other people in the mix as well. So that's always fun. Now I gotta make sure the focus of my mouse is on that screen so I can, there we go. All right, so who is this class for? Obviously I said anyone who needs to understand firsthand what it means to program games or to develop games or so on. So it's generally all GSAS majors sooner or later have to sit through this. Hopefully it'll be fun and worthwhile. There is no assumptions with regards to experience, especially not with particular engine or Unity or something like that. We do use Unity, but you don't have to have any experience in Unity. We kind of assume everybody is kind of coming in this fresh, maybe, certainly assume that people have some experience in games and know what games are, and you've probably taken some intro to game design and some other courses before you got this far, because it is spring semester after all. But it's not required that you know a particular programming language or you have, particular skills. Those of you who are on screen, how many of you probably took CS1 last semester, right? Most people do. All right. So you've got that behind you as well. So if you haven't, it's still good. You might be taking it this semester, or maybe you're taking CS for non-engineering and math majors, or whichever, or maybe you AP'd out of it. I don't know, all these kind of options, lots of ways. But don't worry, we're going to just kind of start at ground level and work our way up from there. I've had some people tell me they learned more about computer science in this class than they did in CS. Who knows? I don't know. We'll see how it goes. So there is going to be a wide background of people in the class. So we use that to our advantage, because we're going to get questions and issues from all different perspectives. People who've done it a million times, who have had 4 or 5 years of Unity experience, but also people who are looking at it for the first time. And you can always learn different things from different people, because Unity is changing all the time. Any platform is changing all the time and adding new features based on the needs of the community or new technology and all that sort of stuff. So generally, there's lots of room for fresh things to kind of creep in. And sometimes those fresh voices, people who don't have the experience, who haven't fallen into certain patterns of doing things, they can, cause you to kind of sit back and say, oh, I never thought of that, or I didn't realize that was a feature, or maybe that's something new that I just hadn't seen yet. So that will get used to our advantage. In general, there are minimums in the course, things that I expect you to demonstrate, to, learn, to talk about, and so on. But there aren't maximums. What I mean by that is if you have experience and you want to put in extra effort, you want to take your game to that, pardon the pun, next level, that's okay. That's good. So if you want to have, multiple levels in your game or incorporate, some technique that you've been thinking about, you can do that. But before you demonstrate advanced topics to me or in the class, want to make sure that you have the bases covered, right? So because it's sometimes you'd be surprised, you can become an expert at some level of something without having you might have accidentally or unintentionally skipped over some core technology or core technique or core concept. Sometimes there are sort of, especially as we're self-taught on things, sometimes you can miss things. You can be self-taught on piano, for example. You play piano wonderfully, and someone says, "Oh, can you read music?" And you're like, "Can't do it." So that's the sort of thing, we want to make sure that we have a common ground for everybody, especially, you're going to go into different courses and things. And so we want to make sure that we have those common things. So you need to demonstrate the mastery of certain basic things and make sure you get certain core concepts, but then go above and beyond that potentially. That's good. So there's room for kind of stretching your skills in the class. Okay. Here's our introduction section. I'm going to hold off on my introductions because I have some cool slides for introducing myself, because why not? That's my prerogative, I guess. But I would like to go around. It's always a little bit challenging. Just want to, you don't have to, I'm not going to put people on spots because we do have that introduction channel over on Discord for you to kind of go into more detail. But I'm just trying to put together some faces and names and voices, especially because people will be chiming in all the time and I'll be like, wonder who that was. So if you could just introduce yourself, say your name, your concentration in GSAS, and if you're not a GSAS student, go ahead, your major. I'm going to assume that most people are first-year students. If you want to mention if you're not a first-year student, that's good. And other things like over on the Discord channel, you're probably going to notice that a lot of people have been putting their RCS ID as part of their name. So hopefully we have some way of resolving your real name and your RCS ID, so we can kind of know who's who and who I'm referring to when I see Smith J35, and that actually goes with Burgermeister Meisterburger, and that goes with all those sort of things. It's always fun. And you can also put your preferred pronouns, way you want to be addressed, and so on the Discord channels as well. So we'll try to go with that. So I'm not sure if all of you are showing up in exactly the order on Discord as you are here for everybody. So I'm just going to be prepared. I'm going to kind of call on people and just say, say hello, your name, and your concentration. That should be enough for now. So I see first Woods J10 up in the corner. How are you doing? And your mic is muted to start with. And your name and concentration? Oh, okay. Any preference as far as, are you into programming or art, or you haven't officially declared a concentration? You could say, just. Okay. So just keeping options open. Cool. All right. Next up, I see Charles. Oh, Charles P. Okay. Next up, Dylan. Oh, two Dylans. Wow, you guys are I'm this semester I got two Scotts, two Seans. I don't know how many Joshes and Dylans. All right, Dylan L we'll start with. All right, Dylan Ross. Cool. Is it Jose? Or is it Josie? I don't know. If I'm bad with pronunciations. Jose? Okay. Kyle. Appreciate that. So I see Ryan next in the queue here. Okay, Wyatt. You're gonna have loads of fun. We have lots to talk about. That's a very. Lots of people start off with computer systems and computer science on top of one another. I've seen a lot of people like in the end choose one or the other. But don't take that as a. It's a challenge. So, Xander. Nice to meet you. Ziegler. They're all very complementary fields depending on how you decide to go. And now I'm into the area where I don't have cameras. So I see wonderful, all sorts of avatars for folks. Beck. Hi, Beck. Cool. In the right place. Let's see. Things starting to move around just a little bit. I'm still okay here, I think. All right, Brandon. If I wind up calling the same person again, it's because things moved around and I meet 40 people today. So I'll be very confused by the end of it. Brandon. Cool. Chad. Nice. Okay. Second Charles. And by second, I only mean second today, not second in any other sense. So you're both firsts in every other possible way. Okay. So your concentration was sorry, I cut you off, or I. Okay. Eric. Okay. Now the next name I'm not sure. Is it just G or Joro? Excellent. Kelly. Whew, a lot of CS concentration and duels here. Krijan or Tony. There we go. Okay. And wait, Ryan, was there already a Ryan or did I already get Ryan and I got confused? Oh, okay. That is just must have moved around on here. Okay, so you already went. All right. Did I miss anybody? I think so. We've got 16, 17, 18. So we're a little bit shy. Hopefully we'll track down, see where everybody else wound up. But welcome. And I am thrilled to see as many CS. It seems like it certainly sounded to me like there's a majority of CS and CS duels among the group here. So that's very cool. One of the things I want to mention early on, because it's you don't want to kind of let this one escape you, especially if you are CS duels, and mostly if you are doing CS concentration, you're going to want to probably be a comp sci duel in some way, make it official. It's going to make it much easier to get into all the courses you need to and make sure you get everything you can out of things. If you don't take the CS dual, you may run into situations where there's kind of like limited enrollment classes that are limited to specifically CS. So it's going to be easier to deal with that when that happens. Also, one of the things you want to try to declare that dual early on as opposed to kind of wait for it. Reasons being, it's just easier to happen. If you were already in from the get-go, as when you first came into RPI, even better. As you try to pick up the dual, as people try to get into the CS department, often they are evaluating how well you did in data structures. I'm not sure how many of you have already taken data structures or are taking it now. Data structure certainly has that reputation of being kind of the weeding course with regards to CS. So you're going to want to put in the time on that. Try to do well in that. They're looking for a B in data structures if you want to be admitted to the CS program here at RPI. So that's a really, really important course. I've done a little consulting in the past on the side on that one, but so I know firsthand, yeah, it's a challenging course. So especially if you got this and that going on, kind of let me know with regards to people's schedules and things. I don't want projects to wind up, stressing people out where suddenly you have projects and big homeworks due in one class and also in this class. And I've got, we've got some flexibility here that we can work with that. But that's one of my public service announcements straight off to make sure, if you are specifically CS dual or CS concentration, don't let it hang out too far, because it does start to become challenging when you're trying to, kind of fit everything into that schedule and curriculum. That's one of the more challenging ones. Cognitive science, a little bit easier to do. You have a little bit more leeway in there. But, it's also the sort of thing, get things going. And for that, the person who's trying to fit CS, CSE, and GSAS all together, awesome. Stay on top of it. Stay sharp. And it can be done, but it can be challenging. So I'll introduce myself. Amorous, I'm Eric Amorous. It rhymes with glamorous. So that's the easiest way to think about it. So it's one of those wonderful names that is probably pronounced the last way that you would think it was until I say that, and then it's obvious how it's pronounced. So it's Eric Amorous, rhymes with glamorous. I am a RPI kind of student through and through. I actually many moons ago got my BS in RPI in CSE, in computer systems engineering. And then I decided to get a master's later on when I came back to RPI as a staff member in computer systems. Worked with Professor Rich Radke over in the department over there, got that degree out of the way. And then more recently, I finished my doctorate a couple years ago in cognitive science. So pretty broad perspective. I've been in a couple of different schools, worked with lots of different people across campus and things. So happy to provide that perspective. I'm also a relatively recent parent of students who went to RPI, graduating in 2016 and 2018 in management. And let's see, my daughter was a dual management and EMAC major, and my son was a CS major. So have lots of perspective on that, both from the what it's like to be an undergrad, as well as what it's like to be a parent of undergrads, and so on. Kind of know, the whole RPI thing inside out and backwards, more or less. So feel free to ask me anything. One of the things about the GSAS program, especially, it's a very strong but relatively small community. We like to make sure that everybody is on top of things and being, taken care of and being heard from, and so on and so forth. It's a very, really good community. So whatever it is, we'll be working on through all kinds of different things, and we'll be, seeing each other in different courses and different capacities and research projects and all that kind of stuff. So feel free to ask about anything. You can contact me via Discord or whatever at any time. So my background is before, this goes back a couple of years. If you know video game history at all, it'll be kind of obvious. I developed tools, usually middleware tools, for various different games companies that you might have heard of: Atari, Sega, Sony, Microsoft, a bunch of different things. My favorite platforms happen to be the Saturn and the Dreamcast, because I actually got to work on those with very closely with Sega and the developers there. So it's lots and lots of fun on that. So if you're into retro gaming, that's also very cool. Happy to kind of talk about that on a side note as well, and what it was like to really develop. Oh, we got a Game Boy up there. Some perspective on how brute force things can be, and sometimes that perspective is really good to have, because why things wind up being done the way they are, because of the history or because of kind of tradition, and knowing what things actually work and what things don't work. So anyway, as far as background on games go, my favorite types of games are certainly adventure and survival horror, no question. Definitely love all of the Resident Evils and that sort of thing. Love big fans of those. One of the most recent survival horror games I've been playing was Alien Isolation. Still haven't finished it, just because I haven't gotten a chance to. Currently, I'm going through a real big Dungeons and Dragons 5e resurgence. Because of the pandemic. I've got a pretty good crews on that, doing that on Roll20. I've been doing some dungeon mastering as well as playing on that. So I'm really enjoying the platform there. It's kind of a very different perspective on games, but kind of scratching the technical itch, because you can do things like write macros and extend the platform, and get at APIs and stuff if you get the right subscriptions on those things. So it's a lot of fun. Very different aspect. If you're looking for an undergrad research independent study project and you want to write macros for Roll20 on their API, we could talk about that. It's kind of crazy. It's a very different aspect of it, combining both, gaming and gaming design and dynamics of, working in a collaborative environment and stuff like that. But a little bit of a different perspective than what we think of when we think of developing video games. So that's lots of fun too. And you can see some of the other games I like playing, everything from, the wonderful, fun Animal Crossing to things that are now becoming classics, Zelda Breath of the Wild, and more recent stuff, Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time, Intergalactic Mining, Borderlands. So everything from, some of them are more indie-oriented, some are AAA. I tend to be a little bit out of phase with regards to what the latest and greatest games are. I love technology demos and so on, but I tend to also wait until the prices come down on some of the games. Otherwise, I go broke just buying every new game when it comes out. I'm also a fan of Lego, but that's a whole nother story. Happy to talk about it sometime. And so at some point, ask me about Lego. We'll leave it at that. So how to reach me with regards to this class or anything else that I mentioned. Normally, my office is down in West Hall, 312. We're actually putting together a new sort of collaborative space for some of the grad students and things, and sort of this weird bowling alley, long office area that's over there. So hopefully, over the course of the next couple of years, we'll see you over there at some point. But for the next semester, I'm entirely remote. I'm one of those unfortunate individuals who winds up with some. I was on the list of people who were at risk because of some health things. Don't need to go into. So I'm remote for the time being. You probably won't see me on campus. Unfortunately, you'll have to deal with remote. I list some office hours, but it's really, you can contact me on Discord just about any time. Some questions. How much experience did I have in the area of cognitive science before I got my PhD? Let's see. I guess I'll talk a little bit more background for that. My cognitive science experience was sort of a funny one. I wound up getting into cognitive science officially because I went to, and I encourage all of you to do this. There is a Wednesday noon general research topics in cognitive science lecture that's offered, and it's varying topics. These days, I think it's all online as well. You can kind of tune in. And it tends to be people from the department sort of presenting the different things. And the cognitive science department here at RPI is very, very broad as well. Everything from AI to studying expertise development to studying. I was doing multimedia learning theory and collaborative kind of brainstorming experiments, as well as kind of novel visualizations. Very, very broad topics. So I decided to get the free pizza, and that's I wound up going for the free pizza at these lectures as I was a staff member over at MPAC, and just kind of one thing led to another. I said, hey, this would be kind of cool to take on. I also had some friends within the department. Before approaching cognitive science from that perspective, though, I'd been doing a lot of things, and even the stuff I'd been doing in games and music software and so on, a lot of it revolved around sort of algorithmic behavioral techniques in computer science and how to apply things. Sometimes not exactly AI, but things that sort of mimicked or patterned or kind of presented themselves as if they could be, sometimes kind of emergent creativity, things that involved perceptual modeling. I've done a lot of stuff in video compression and various multimedia compression, things like that, which you have to have a good feel for, what is, ways we kind of model certain human perceptual systems, the way vision systems work, the way people judge quality. So I got into cognitive science really without even knowing it at first, but then a lot of the areas that I was working on in more traditional computer science involved some aspect of human perception and engagement and interactivity and collaboration. So it wound up being like, I didn't even realize all these things fell under that umbrella, but they did, which is cool. So sometimes you're working with something for years and suddenly you say to yourself, oh, that's what that is. It happens. So encourage you to kind of always be looking around and seeing, what's going on and where's things. So that's a little background on that, and I'll talk more about that maybe as time goes on. So usually I don't wear a tie, but I did get this. I'm very proud of this tie. It's over the holidays. I got this. I don't know if you can see it. It is a Pac-Man tie, and so I figured kick off the semester right, being all proper and everything like that. So we'll see how long the formality lasts. So I cut my hair, got my tie, got my all official looking here, but we'll be a lot less formal throughout as things happen. All right. So housekeeping, this is going to bounce back and forth a little bit. Thank you. You'll notice I do tend to kind of bounce around a bit. So for those of you who have concerns about, being able to concentrate on class or the challenges of this remote environment, and, in this day and age, there's so much vying for different people's attention and focus and so on. I've done both some study and introspective work on issues of focus and attention, things like attention deficit, things about multimedia learning theory and how that's all scaffolded by what we understand about how cognition works. So I'm always learning from my own behavior about what it means to try to stay focused and still on topic and so on. So if anyone wants to talk about those things as well. So I do tend to cover a broad range of material, and sometimes we'll kind of steer in this direction and then steer in that direction. Try to keep, hopefully the slides will keep us on track, and we'll be covering the topics, but be prepared. Every so often we'll need to adjust our seatbelts to make sure we're not being thrown out of the vehicle. So thankfully we have systems like the Blackboard system in LMS to kind of help with that. Some people love to complain about LMS, and I'm one of them. It's a weird system. It can be kind of fluky, but despite the fact that it's clunky, it is kind of our friend. It can be a wonderful kind of anchor and road, kind of the train tracks we occasionally need to keep us going in the right direction. So on LMS, we'll have things like the postings, the links to these videos, the links to lecture materials, things about project requirements. We're not going to use any of the features on there, like the additional message boards and some things. I have done some quizzes via LMS. I wasn't totally thrilled at how that works. But for general knowledge base stuff that we need to refer back to or to stay on top of, where our schedule is, what the syllabus is, and so on, LMS is the best place for that, because you can find it. I will be making announcements throughout the semester, usually through LMS, to kind of make sure they get to everybody. Right now, there's a separate section for section 1 and section 2. I'm trying to work with the LMS people to get those kind of combined and make my life a little bit easier, to make sure I don't accidentally tell section 1 one thing and forget to tell section 2 that thing. We're going to do our best to stay on top of that. All right. So one of the things about LMS, I tend to try to use it in as live a fashion as possible. What that means is I like to post links on there to things, to other Google documents and so on, Google Slides, Google Sheets, and so on, because this way there is just one set that I can update, that I can literally edit as we're looking at them, and they're live on there, right? So I don't tend to publish a lot of PDFs on there unless it's something that's really meant for you to be able to download, right? So there may be some files occasionally you'll need to download from there, but usual presentation materials, video links, and all that kind of stuff will hopefully be pointers over to live documents, and they'll be the most recent things. Even this one, if you're following the link over on, if you grabbed and opened the link on LMS, that's the very version I'm using right here, the Google Doc. Okay, the textbook. There is a textbook for this class. It's a recommended but optional text. I don't know how many of you have gotten it. You can kind of flip through it, decide on your own. It's a good text. It's getting a little bit out of date now. Thankfully, a lot of the core things in the text, and certainly in Unity development, are still very, very valid. It's really great because it's not just Unity programming. It is an introduction to game design, prototyping, and development with Unity and C#. So there's still a lot of good stuff in the book about sort of the whole game development process in general. So it's a good book to have on your shelf if you need it, and if you are at all concerned, if you're saying, well, I'm really worried about going over these things, making sure I'm really, really new to programming, then you might consider it being more foundational. But if you're coming at it, usually people coming at things from a CS side, or you've got some Unity experience, whether you have the text or not, I don't lecture from the book in this case. It's one of these things. It's a great support scaffolding, but we're gonna there's so many resources. Hopefully, most of the ones we're gonna talk about here and experience firsthand, that the text isn't really a required thing. It's good to have, but not a requirement. So. Love to get this out of the way, or try to address this as quickly as possible. Thankfully, the slide works now. We're having some problems this morning in this one particular slide, but it was weird. I'm assuming the majority of you have Windows laptops. That certainly seems to be the case, but some of you may be asking yourselves, well, okay, I heard this Unity thing. Is it supported on, do you have a Mac? Do you have, are you running Linux? And Unity does have support for both Mac OS and now Linux. Linux support is in preview. I'm not entirely sure what exactly that means. So if you really, really, really want to work in Unity in Linux, you'll be potentially at the very bleeding edge of things, and you may have to take some more responsibility for some of the the tech support you might need, or if you run into an issue. I'll do my best to help, but we may be, on new ground there. So be careful. I'm going to recommend that you use Windows because, as the wonderful quote says, it just works, right? That's sort of the preferred platform, the one that 90+% of the community tends to use. I personally have used OS X, Unity on OS X, and I've had great results with it. That is pre-Big Sur, though. A lot of things have been going on the Mac now. A couple of OSs ago, they stopped supporting OpenGL the way they used to, and now the whole Big Sur thing is very interesting. The school laptop is certainly fine, so it only gets into issues, kind of weird things. You don't need the latest versions, latest hardware. If you are, as you get into things more like the Unreal Engine is a lot more heavy lifting when it regards. It's a great engine as well, but typical laptop is not, that's more like, it's better to have multiple monitors and more recent hardware for graphics and things with the Unreal Engine. That's one reason Unity is kind of nice as a first, professional engine to kind of get to know. Works on, the baseline of Unity works pretty well on reasonable hardware. So yeah, if you're on Big Sur on Mac, ooh, that's kind of scary, but generally older, you're okay. There's this new Linux preview. If anyone wants to use that, cool. But I'm going to assume, and I'm going to be demonstrating things for the most part, unless we're down in my music studio, we'll be on the PC up here. Downstairs there, we're sort of mostly Mac based, but that's a whole nother story. I don't know if we'll get down there or not. So that's the background. Get that out of the way. All right. So now let's talk a little bit about some terminology. So what we're going to talk about now. Certainly, if you've taken CS and you're coming from a computer science background, when I say, well, what is programming? You have probably some pretty strong opinions on what programming means, and you may say to yourself, well, what's the difference between normal programming? Why do I take programming in CS1 and take game programming? Why is it different? What are the things that are different about it? Is it something intrinsically different about the way I'm going to code? Is it I have to use a different language, or I have to approach things differently, and so on? Maybe there are definitely some differences, and differences early on, and things that are important early on when you approach game programming versus just straight up computer science in some ways. Now, we use the terms coding and scripting and programming. There are different subtleties to all of those things, and we could spend an hour just discussing those differences. But call it what you will. We can say, well, scripting is really not a core low-level programming. It's more scripting on top of some way to add functionality to an existing engine that was developed with a lower-level program. We can have those arguments. But fundamentally, the act of programming or coding or scripting, as we're talking about, is the process of taking some algorithm that you want, some process that you want a computer to do, and you encode it using some notation. It is usually, we consider that to be a programming language so that it can be executed by a computer. Okay, so that's the process of taking something, some idea, some algorithm, some recipe, and codifying it somehow, or programming it, crunching it into some format that is going to ultimately be something the machine can use to actually execute it. We're going to be predominantly doing text-based programming, kind of traditional programming, typed on a keyboard in a very explicit, expressive language. We're going to be using C# a lot. But I think, to me personally, programming actually goes above and beyond the notion of traditional text programming. And there's going to be some opportunity to talk about visual programming or visual scripting as well. That's something that's becoming commonplace in game programming, in engines like Unity and engines like Unreal and so on and so forth. And some environments where you're doing game development or game programming, it might be entirely visual. Right? You hear this, there's always that one claim, that video on YouTube, like, oh, I created Grand Theft Auto 9 and without writing a single line of code. You always hear that, and you think, well, there's no programming involved. And that's usually not the case. There's some type of programming, some type of process where, of course, you had to tell it what to do. You had to somehow get it to do the things you wanted to. So yeah, Scratch Master, it's great. So we're gonna talk about things that can sometimes in a very high level as concepts, right? But I'm going to assume that they're going to be ultimately, who knows, maybe 5 years in the future you're going to be using entirely different tools, but probably some of the ideas and the ways that we're talking about them today are going to continue to go forward. Certainly things that we were doing 10s and 20s of years ago. There are definitely core concepts that live on and that are important to understand. The way you have like things running in parallel, or multitasking, or concurrent programming, and object-oriented programming, things like that kind of rise above a particular implementation or a particular language. So we're talking the big sense about game programming sometimes. And some of you, I think maybe not the majority of you in this class, but some of you are saying, well, I'm an artist, I'm a writer, I'm a musician. Why do I have to take this class? Why can't I just like get past, why do I have to worry about coding at all? Well, first off, everybody who is approaching, the programming from a game programming point of view, I find usually are coming to this with some sort of creative endeavor, some creative inkling in mind. They push them towards this, not because they just wanted to study pure computer science, but because there was some aspect of that creative process of that, realizing some creative vision, that kind of brought them over to the game programming side anyway. So I think all of us share a little bit of that sense of creativity and wonder that inspires artists and writers and musicians and so on. So everybody's kind of approaching it that way. But some people obviously are, focusing more on those aspects. And for those people, even if you don't think you're a coder, you will be likely working closely with them to realize your visions, to kind of work on these projects. And it's going to make life much easier if you know the lingo, if you can talk the talk and walk the walk, and what's involved, what trouble people are going to go through, or programmers are going to go through, or what the hoops that have to be jumped through in order to get things to happen. Right? Sooner or later, the creative output that you have is going to come alive only in a game through some type of programming. And whether that's just, okay, I put this thing in here, I drag this onto this box, and I connect this wire to that, and so on. Someone is going to need to do that to get these art assets to kind of come to life. There's going to be something beyond just the creation of those assets, right? There's going to be that, how do we breathe that life into them? And that part is sort of the programming. So it's going to be important to be able to talk about programming with those, on those teams, how to communicate with and among coders, right? So sometimes it's just studying the language and facility, not the computer language, but the language that we use and the ways that we talk about developing and coding and so on as well. So there's a little bit of a cultural aspect to this. This isn't exactly a communication intensive course, but in some ways, there is importance to the way we communicate in about these things. So there's this myth, which maybe I already addressed largely, but this myth of clear definitions, that you can kind of come into this and say, okay, all I want to do is focus on one thing. I just want to be an artist. I just want to be a writer. I just want to be a programmer, designer, and so on. That's rare. That's, maybe you wind up as part of maybe a really, really big project where you can do that. But ultimately, you still have to be aware of what other parts of the puzzle, what part of this wonderful swirly mist of multicolor, and different approaches and backgrounds and, tools and quivers and all those sorts of things. It's really much harder to silo yourself. So it's beneficial to realize that, everything potentially touches everything in there. So we'll say that. Okay. It's good to be open-minded about there. But back to programming. So generally, if I said, okay, what are the fundamental pieces of programs, or as they're running, as they're executing? Basically, there's going to be some set of rules and there's going to be some set of data. And generally, the data is going to be run through those rules, and you're going to have some result according to what's happening during those rules, right? Or according to as things happen under those rules. That's fairly a computer science-y orientation of it, rules and data. Now, as we get closer towards the game programming side, as we, putting that game piece in front of it, the rules and data become a little bit more grandiose, a little bit more ambitious, right? Start to think of them as more actions and objects. Things in our games, we tend to talk about an object on the screen, or an enemy, or a bomb, or a thing, or a power-up, or these are very object-oriented as opposed to just a heap of text or a string, things like that, right? So they become objects in and of themselves, and they are generally will have actions that these objects can perform, or actions that are performed on them, right? The player picks up a power-up. The enemy fires at at the player, these sorts of things, right? So there's this real interaction and tension and kind of simulation and liveliness about the sort of things that we work with when we're doing game programming, right? It's an immediacy. It is a, fluidity. It is ultimately, most of the time, it's real time. It's about time. It's about scope. It's scale, and so on, right? It's not just text in, text out. Which, of course, for you is going to be a piece of cake if you come from the CS background, right? So we're going to see all this. We're just going to work things out, and hopefully we don't experience, well, no, I don't know. Sometimes I maybe I should take this slide away. It's meant to say, okay, don't underestimate programming, but don't be scared by it either, right? Sometimes people are thrown off by a sheet of code or, trying to read through something. This is kind of scary because it doesn't have lots of comments in, or the right comments. Don't necessarily have lots of comments, but having the right comments and the right structure and the right things to code. It doesn't have to be scary. I'm going to recognize that coding isn't necessarily a piece of cake. It's not trivial. Game programming, because it is more special, sometimes it can be even more challenging. But don't worry. We're not going to try not to freak everybody out. Programming is hard, but so on and so forth. Yeah. Let's get back to, why is game programming different again? And hopefully sort of started hinting at this, is this notion of interaction, right? It's not just text in, text out. Usually you can arguably, I guess you can have games that are text in, text out. But there'll usually be something more on top of that. There'll be some sort of maybe a turn system where the text goes in, then you type text in, something happens, you take the next turn, you type, there's a communication, there's a give and take, there's a process. There's still, it may not be blink of an eye, completely real time, but there is a sense of scale and time and space as things go on, right? So that's one of the core things that makes game programming different, that we're aware of this connection, the human computer interaction that's involved. There are ways to certainly do simulations that have no interactivity. You just feed all, every bit of text on the internet to Watson and ask Watson to say, okay, tell me, how are people feeling about a certain subject? And it can simulate, all sorts of wonderful things and give you the results outside. And, based on simulations of, we can simulate the weather and all that sort of thing. They're not meant to be experienced in real time. That's the game aspect of it, or the real kind of real-time simulation aspect of it. So we're going to be always kind of aware of that scale, that interaction, that kind of tension between a real person experiencing that programming that we've done, the end result, in some, kind of non-trivial fashion. Maybe it's real time, maybe it's not real time. We had a good discussion going about what's the game now. I'm just drawing a blank. I want to say Red Hot, but the game I'm talking about. The Super Hot, yes. Whew. That's, boy, your volume was loud. Just blew my head right off. But yes, Super Hot is a great example where time doesn't pass exactly in real time, not all the time, but time is a big aspect of it. And in fact, it becomes one of the core mechanics of the game itself, where the game only progresses when the character is moving. But if the character freezes, then suddenly everything in the game slows down, so they can kind of look at the world in different ways and kind of experience it in different ways. So time, obviously fundamental. Other games like Braid, you can go backward and forward in time and kind of reel things in and out. So let's see, someone mentioned, imagine not telling an AI what your game idea is and making it code it for you. Oh, that's a tricky one. In terms of AI, we could start thinking of, have AIs comb through all the games in the world and invent their own games. I guess who knows if that might happen. But AI and deep learning, certainly it's some interesting. We'll get going on that. That's a more advanced course. So we are going to be working in Unity and C#. So you will be using a student license of Unity. All right. The nice thing about the student license is you get a little bit more than you do in the personal license, but you're going to be using the student license. Don't worry about add-ons, and we're going to kind of avoid add-ons for the most part. We're going to download, I think the most recent version of Unity is 2.2F1. But I'm realizing today that this slide is very incongruous in terms of it just jumps out in the middle of the presentation here. I don't know why I did that. But it's always back and forth, multiple levels, jars you back to reality. So we're going to find a version of Unity, install it on your machine, get the student license, and try to stick with that one. You don't necessarily need to be always getting the latest and greatest version of Unity. What image can we use to apply for the student license? I'm not quite sure what you mean by image. Does it ask you to have a student ID or something like that now? Oh, okay. Yeah, ID card, that should work. Okay, I guess they're being a little bit more strict now. So scan of a student ID. They're actually, when you get the student license, there's kind of two pieces of it. It's I think the turnaround is really quick on just getting the basic ability to download Unity, run it on your machine. Don't worry about the 2 weeks. This is what I'm getting at. There's another bunch of things that are additional assets and some game templates and some other things that you can get that are part also of that student license, and specifically that all the things that come through GitHub and so on. So someone got rejected. That seems odd. But don't worry about hopefully don't worry about the other things. You don't need all that. For this course, you just need to have Unity running on your machine. So you just have to have the basic pieces of it. So yeah, that's the part of that whole new student license thing is a relatively new feature that they started giving. I think it just kind of confuses things a little bit. But as long as you were able to download Unity, open it up, and open a project in Unity, that's all you really need from this course's perspective. And that's doesn't require normally it's not the whole 2-week process of approval and so on. Should be fairly quick. I think most people have had that happen pretty quickly now. If you have issues with that, let me know. Okay, that's a new one. Yeah, we are covered by the normal educational grant license, so it should be all in there. The Unity's licensing program is a little bit odd, especially because of the personal license and so on. But it should be. Hang in there. Don't worry. The longer approval process is something we don't really even need to worry about. You should get your basic Unity download under the student. If you have the normal, so someone's asking about the I'm assuming the Unity personal license, right? There's the two free licenses. There's the personal version and the student license. You can do fine with either of them. The main thing that happens when you have the student license is that I believe you get 5 team seats instead of 3, which for this purpose of this course, you really just need to make sure you have 2. One for you and one for me, so that I can actually pull your projects down as a team member. You'll wind up setting me up as a collaborator or team member. This way I can go to the same repository where you're going to keep your code, download it all, run it from there, and we can kind of, when we need to debug things and converse and so on, I can see your progress as you're working on your projects and so on. But beyond that, I think things are pretty much in, they're interchangeable. I actually use the personal license and not the student license, and I've not had any issues on there. I think you're going to get potentially some additional stuff. Project, does that mean projects aren't done in groups? That is correct. This group is individual. This class is individual projects. Okay. All individual projects. Game Dev 1, Game Dev 2, most of your other classes beyond first year, there's going to be lots and lots of group projects. But for this one, we're all individual. All right. So, or you're going to be a team of 2. I'm on everybody's team, but you're doing all the work yourself. So that'll keep things progressing. And I've had some issues with the audio on this. I don't know if you can hear it.
Sucking at something? first step towards being sort of good at something.
Crank that up. All right. So this is the disclaimer.
Sucking at something is the first step towards being sort of good at something.
All right. So if you're downloading Unity for the first time, hopefully you heard the quote here, of course, is sucking at something is the first step towards being good at something, right? Nobody, well, I don't know. I'm trying to think this. Has anyone gotten a AAA title, first time out, the first time they developed with Unity? Usually not. You have to experience the bumps, get the bruises, put in the time, kind of be bad at it. Ask the what feel like the dumb questions starting out. And along the lines with that, we have to be careful about biting off more than we can chew, or fixating on one particular thing, managing your ambition, avoiding the temptations, wind up getting, down the alleyways where suddenly you're entirely derailed by this newfound thing that you've discovered pickles and they take over everything. And by the time we're done, we can no longer even see the fact that we were supposed to be putting together a basic hamburger. Okay. So some of the things in this course are going to be about, okay, let's make sure we're covering our breadth and not getting caught up in something. I've seen, aspects where someone was like, yeah, what I really wanted to do is develop my own way of programming, coming up with some loading of some, and they just got so fixated on one particular feature that everything else was kind of smothered by that or kind of fell by the wayside. And those are the sort of situations that you can, if you're not careful, you can wind up in. So in this course, you want to be careful about managing your ambition, avoiding temptation, managing your time, one bite at a time. We're going to try to make things to progress here, so that, okay, we're going to first look at the UI and the canvas and the kind of basic things and make sure that we have certain CS core concepts, all our ducks in a row on that sort of thing, without getting way down the rabbit hole of AI, for example, because then we're going to miss, how do tile maps work, and how does basic animations work, and how does this finite state machine work, and so on. So we're going to have to cover a fairly broad amount of things, and we're going to try to cover it one bite at a time and do it consistently, right? We can't devour an elephant in 2 days, even at one bite at a time. We're going to need to make sure that, starting now or starting, definitely next class and so on, you're trying to put things into practice that we're doing. Okay, whether it's conquering the UI and basic scene management, try that up front. Get that going. Don't wait too long. Make sure to ask questions early on. Now, and when I say ask questions, there is no shame flute in this class. There is no what's it called? The Schandflute, which means there used to be, if you've ever been to one of these kind of medieval villages or like even the Wild West town, they would always have a pillory out front where someone would commit some crime and they would shame them. They would put them in the stocks and you'd put them out in public so that everyone could laugh at them and mock them. And in Germany, I guess at some point there was this thing called the shame flute, which they would, if a musician was particularly bad, I guess by some standard, which I think is crazy that you could even say that a particular musician is bad, they would lock them up. They would lock this thing around their neck and lock their hands around this flute as if they were playing this instrument and expose them to ridicule in the town square for crimes against music. So in this class, there is no such thing. All right. It is better to ask the obvious, quote unquote, dumb questions. I have yet to have anyone ask a truly dumb question. There's always, and even if it was, I don't think there is such a thing, right? Let's just wipe that off the map. There is, you just ask it. And the main important thing is, a question that might feel kind of marginal. If you ask it early enough, it's brilliant. If like, I've never even seen Unity, but does it do this? And you're like, wow, that was, don't sidetrack me too much. But the earlier you ask the basic questions, the better. Don't let those things go too long, because you wind up, a week before a project is due and you said, well, I was afraid to ask because I was embarrassed. Don't do that. Be embarrassed early on. I'm all for that. I embarrass myself all the time. So it's it may feel embarrassing, but there's going to be no piece of it that drops us down to this shame flute sort of thing. And especially now we have this wonderful anonymity of the internet and so on. You don't even have to worry about, the class portion of things. We can all hide behind our screens. So anyway, another part of it I like to bring up. One of the secrets to programming, and it's sometimes, this comes under the category more of debugging and the aspect of just being tenacious and having dogged determination and enjoying the ride and the challenge. Okay, if you're familiar with Sisyphus, which is a legendary figure, he, as a punishment for a crime, student license is literally just a limited run pro. That's absolutely right. Yes. Yes. So it's you get everything. Student license is great. So Sisyphus, back to Sisyphus. Silly rabbit segues are for kids. Sisyphus was cursed because of a crime he committed against the gods. I think it was Hades, and we talked a little bit about it earlier. The crime isn't so important, but the fact is, what happened, the punishment was the important part. So Sisyphus is this character that has to push this huge boulder up this hill every day. And the boulder reaches the top of the hill, and eventually at the end of the day, it rolls back down. And Sisyphus has to push up the hill every day. It's over and over again. It's never ending, which seems awful, to be doomed to do the same thing over and over again. But I like to say, well, what if Sisyphus happened to be a super body build, is super into health and working out and hitting the gym. And that's just what Sisyphus was into. So every morning Sisyphus gets to get up and work out. And that's all Sisyphus has to do. It's just live the dream of doing exactly what it is, because it's the process. And if you can love the process, if you can really enjoy the process, even if it is kind of this dogged thing that you just have to, work it out and so on, enjoying that challenge often makes it that much more easy to do or fulfilling. A good chunk, I can guarantee you, as you get into game development and CS in general, there's always going to be, you will be challenged that one problem, I don't know what it's driving me crazy. You're going to wind up searching through Google and the internet and trying different things. And I know debugging, we always say, don't just change things randomly, hoping that something else will change. But sometimes when you're at the end of your rope, you're going to wind up saying, well, let me just change this. I have a theory, right? As long as you have a theory about why something works, you try it and you just keep at it. Debugging, the sooner you develop sort of a respect for just banging your head against something in a way that you're not going to give up, that you're going to enjoy the challenge of saying, okay, there's something wrong, but the cool thing is, I know that I can fix it. I know there's going to be a solution. It's just up to me to find it. And sometimes, find that inner goal or that inner push to find what the problem is, that's worth its weight in gold, Bitcoin, whatever, in terms of salary. That's a quality that employers and team members are going to look for in a potential member of their team, right? They want people to be willing to keep at it. It's not so much just, you have no idea why it works. So it's a good meme, but it should be, one of the core values that you should have is being able to, analyze a problem and stick with it and get to that point. Debugging skills are really, really good to have. And sometimes, you don't know why that worked, but you can go back and figure out why it worked and analyze something, figure out, well, what potential flaws are there in there? Maybe there's you excel at working on refining code or refactoring code, so on. There's be opportunities for that too. So the process of development can be a fulfilling one, even if it feels frustrating. Sometimes we try to get a certain amount of personal fulfillment from being good at being developers, not just being publishers per se, but being the perfect people who developed it. All right. So anyway, back over to the other side. Third-party stuff. So the stuff that you need, the code that you don't know how it works. This is why this is important. Occasionally, you may be tempted to just go grab a library or chunk of code that somebody else wrote that hopefully just works. Now, in this class, we're going to avoid that. We're going to be occasionally, I'm going to provide some small template packages that you might use, that just so we're all on the same page or have the same buttons on the screen or the same, scene structure or something like that. And that's going to be fine. You can reuse code that you have built across the different parts of the project. That's certainly fine. If you are using code that came from the lectures and so on, I expect you to add comments to it to show that you understand how it works, to basically put that code in your own voice. So you should never be cut and pasting code. You should be paraphrasing code from class, so to speak. You can implement concepts you find. We don't expect everyone to be like inventing cutting edge technology in this class. However, you shouldn't be grabbing third-party scripts, libraries, packages, components, and so on, right? As we work on camera systems, or as we work on, AI things and kind of whether wayfinding or whatever, expect you to actually be implementing it, right? So even if you grab an asset pack because you want to use the sprites in it, don't use the scripts that came with it, okay? All of the code, I expect to see your own original code, or paraphrased from class, or your implementation of some concept. That's fine, but do not use ready-made scripts or components, even if they seem really, really cool. Maybe if you want to try to make a case as to why you need that in order to do some above and beyond thing, ask me about them. Okay, but generally I'm looking for all original code here, right? Now, except with regards to third-party stuff, you don't have to worry about art in this class necessarily. You can if you want, but you don't have to, right? So the other stuff in the game, the other assets like art, you don't have to draw your own characters, your own sprites, and so on. You can bring in assets. I'm not going to be judging people based on your design and art skills. And that even goes like, I'm not expecting you to develop a completely radically new type of game mechanic. So it may be very well implementing something that you saw in a game and you just wanted to see, develop it yourself from scratch inside Unity. So you don't have to be, it's game programming is this class. It's not necessarily game design. It's not art. It's not, so it's, some of it is just, let's understand the concepts and things underneath. So we're going to have some leeway with regards to using other assets, particularly art assets, right? So you can go lots and lots of sources. Same thing goes for sound and music. I do recommend against using kind of, commercial music that's not royalty free or open source. So, if there's like your particular favorite artist, you want to include that as background music in your game. Maybe not. Reason being, not because I don't want to see it there, but we are going to do some things with regards to sort of, going through the publishing process, or maybe even putting some of these things. Hopefully you find, they become building blocks for things you might want to have in your portfolio, or things you show to other people and demonstrate to other people, in which case copyright things might creep in on you. And you don't want that to be an issue. So try to use open sourced or publicly available, or if you want to record your own sound effects, that's cool too. You'd be amazed at, how easy that can be, or using, just looped audio is currently fine. As you get into, again, the other classes, game dev 1, 2, and so on, you're going to need to be doing everything original. Whereas now I'm going to focus on the original programming piece of things as opposed to the original art creation. Good question. Ziegler had asked about, will the games in this class typically be 2D or 3D? They will be 2D. Reason being that most of you probably haven't taken, gone through the whole 3D pipeline classes, in terms of asset creation and animation and skinning and so on and so on. So we're going to be more or less doing stuff in 2D. So that, I guess I jumped. I was talking. This is the we're working about the programming part. So I'm going to jump right. 3D involves more complex elements. That's absolutely right. It's a couple of slides away, I guess. So, but don't worry, it's 2D for now. There's going to be some opportunities to do some 3D stuff. And the good news is that everything is still applicable, because we're going to be talking conceptually. Components on a game object, doesn't matter if it's 2D or 3D, or even the case of the physics that we're going to be using. Yes, things are going to be a little bit more straightforward because they're in 2 dimensions, but, extending that to the 3rd dimension, the concepts aren't necessarily going to change. They're going to be a little bit, the math is going to become a little bit more complex because we talk about larger matrices, or maybe we're talking about quaternions instead of simple rotations and so on. But conceptually, architecturally, things are going to be very similar. All right. But there is more. So we've already talked, okay, so we're using game assets. What package can we use? There's one package that doesn't come core to Unity that I do allow, and it's a little bit, it's not exactly trivial to put it into the engine, but it's this new thing. It's called Bolt. So Unreal has blueprints. Unity now has Bolt. It was created by another company, but now Unity has bought that from that company. Ludic Software, I think is the name. Yes, I'm remembering it. Ludic. They have a couple of other different assets and things, really kind of cool tools. But Bolt is becoming sort of the de facto visual programming tool inside of Unity. It's really cool. It's lightweight as far as programming goes. You can do mostly just about anything you can do in C#. You can probably do in Bolt, and there's a bunch of cool things as far as state machines and kind of some built-in behaviors and stuff you can do in there that are really, really cool. It can sometimes complicate the export process if you were trying to like export a game to the web, things like that. And sometimes that's a little bit wonky. I don't require that you build a game in Bolt, but we're going to have at least one lecture where we kind of go through what it's like to use Bolt, and that you'll find similar. So when you do wind up using blueprints in Unreal, or you happen to be a Max MSP programmer or something like that, you'll see some commonalities to visual programming versus text-based programming. One bit of good news is you don't have to choose one or the other. Also, you can use Bolt alongside C# if you like. They actually work pretty well together also. So we're going to touch on Bolt a little bit, right? It is a free piece. You can just get it just like anything else in Unity, but it is a separate package. And that is the one package that I say, okay, yes, that's a package you can use. Right? So, I don't have my watch on. 3:46. Okay. Things are going to start snowballing and wrapping up here. So through the course of the semester, there's basically going to be 4 projects or 4 sub-projects, actually. You're going to wind up creating one master Unity project that's going to have these 4 components in there. There's a reason we're going to do it as one master project, just because it helps an awful lot with housekeeping and architecture and so on. So there's going to be 4 projects within a master project, and they're going to be they're designed in such a way so we can cover sort of things in a way that builds core concepts as we move, and you get a little bit more freedom to kind of explore different genres as we go. We're going to start with a simple text/audio adventure where you're going to be using mostly the Unity UI, which has the built-in kind of buttons and text boxes and so on. We're going to do minimal, if any, graphics on there. I'm going to show some examples of that next time we meet. And I'm actually going to put some stuff up so you can kind of see it and experience it firsthand. But that's going to be really focused on some core programming concepts and, talking a little bit about, conceptualizing things that eventually the engine will do for us. And through there, we're also going to, learn along the way a little bit about, of course, C#, Bolt, maybe the Unity editor, the whole Visual Studio community, how that works, some very lightweight debugging techniques, just using, print to the console so we can kind of figure out what's going on in the game. We're going to get into the audio components as well. I like to introduce audio early on in the process because there's often a tendency to just leave audio as an afterthought in game development. And that's kind of unfortunate, especially now as we're getting into things that are more and more immersive, and the stereo fidelity is just amazing on things, or audio fidelity on things. So you shouldn't be thinking of things as either being visual or auditory or whatever. You should be thinking of things as, here's an object in the game. What sound does it make? What does it look like? What does it feel like? How does the user experience in that? So the sooner we think of these things as having rich modality, the better. We start thinking that way. So I like to introduce audio early on. It's also a lot of bang for the buck there. And we're going to talk about, basic concepts and Unity objects and so on. And a little bit of sort of just brute force approach to things. You click a button, you're going to have to keep track of motion around the screen. Every time the user presses the W key, is that moving in the X direction or the Y direction, sort of thing. So we're going to, do it old school. The second one is going to be a little bit more kind of prescriptive in terms of the features of the game. It's basically going to do sort of an arcade-ish game. It's based on Kaboom, also known as the apple picker, where there's like an enemy that moves back and forth and drops things that the player has to catch, based on some specific ways of using the mouse and so on, incorporate certain elements. And there's going to be, it needs to do this, 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 and this. So there's going to be less area to kind of really kind of stretch the creative boundaries, but we're going to cover some, lots of good basic things in there, basic concepts, as well as introducing physics and collisions and so on, and the beginnings of behavior. The second two projects are the bigger ones, and they are, worth more for that reason, but they're also going to have a lot more, kind of room for you to try different things out. The first one kind of concentrates on the player character and enemies, and starts introducing things like, a little bit more of physics and so on. We call that the shoot 'em up game, the shmup game. Patterns often, similar to like your bullet hell, Tohu, your Enter the Gungeon sort of game, where it's a top-down or an RPG type of game, where we're not so concerned about the physics of the environment, but we do, like shoot things. So, right, there's the notion of, okay, you hurl something in that direction, so you have to give it a force and push it in that direction. It's going to hit things and encounter things. So it's some good basic physics, as well as, what happens? How does the enemy know to chase us and follow us? And when is an enemy, how does it see us? Some basic arcade AI type of things. It's going to be a top-down game largely. And the last game is generally known as the platformer or side scroller, where there's certain things about the environment that are more driven by physics, right? There's more about how the player encounters the environment, what's going on with events and maps, and the environment is dynamic and the camera moves around. We have, joints and effectors and the combination of scripted and physics-based motion and so on. So it's going to be much more about kind of filling in that last piece of it. So things can build on one another. What I like to do is, let's see, if you're just rereading the script, this is just the short version. Don't worry too much about that. We are going to have, basically, like I said, there's going to be one project that those 4 projects sit within. If you want to get even more ambitious, I've seen people do it, that you can jump from game to game as they exist by, you encounter this thing, you're going through your text-based adventure and you encounter a box and you open it, and that leads you to one of the other levels of another part of the game, part of the project. And that's, maybe you leave that to the end, because obviously you don't have the platformer until later in the semester. But we can have some fun with that in terms of like mixing and matching these sort of genres and mixing and matching components as well. But for starters, the basic thing is that we're going to have this idea of this one project that's going to contain the other projects via scenes. So that's, we talk about some basic structures and hierarchy in the game. And I will provide you with a package within the next week or so that's going to have, the basic buttons on the screen, so that when you launch your game, you can say, okay, I'm going to play the adventure game or the apple picker game or the shoot 'em up game. And you can also customize your, start screen and about, having your own about box, that sort of thing. Right. And one of the reasons that I love doing it this way as opposed to the other way is that with 47 students taking the class, it's much easier to maintain 47 live projects on Unity teams versus 160, 170, 180 projects that I'm all trying to juggle throughout the whole semester. So it makes my life easier, and it will make your life easier as well, because you'll have, kind of one repository. You not have to worry about, okay, let me set that project up again and set up another organization and make sure to keep that updated and so on. So make life a little bit easier from the team collaboration point of view, having a master project that everything just sort of lives in. All right. Which brings us to homework 0. And some of you, it sounds like you've already started, downloading Unity, thinking about the latest version. So get the Unity student version with Visual Studio 2019. That's, we're going to work on there. Hopefully everything winds up installed correctly on there. There's some really cool auto text features that make coding inside of Unity and C# much easier if it's all working correctly. And hopefully it just works out of the box. We can add components after the fact to the installation, but out of the box, you want to have that Visual Studio support. And mentioned on Discord about the building something for WebGL and the Windows IL2C stuff. We'll mention that in a second. So these are just some pointers for where you can get those packages. You will gonna create a 2D project. Be careful when you create Unity projects. The moment you create a new project in Unity, do I have any problem using VS Code instead of VS 2019? If Unity was that your option to set it up inside of Unity? I don't know what it's allowing you to do these days. Sometimes if you can work through, all right, if it's already set up and working, then chances are it's fine. Yeah. If you've got an environment, if you've got a Unity environment that's already working, keep using it. Definitely. All right. If you don't, then go through the process. But one of the weird things about Unity, good and bad thing, is the moment you create a project, it's sort of, they're all, projects are sort of sticky. They stick around. It's not just like, creating a temporary project and throwing it away. It winds up, it's up on the Unity cloud the moment you've sort of created it, because Unity kind of checks it in and wants to back up things, even if you're not using the team collaboration and so on. And they tend to stick around. So be careful about accidentally creating lots of kind of trivial Unity projects if you don't have to. And with regards to the Unity project that you create, that's going to be the one that you share with me, make sure it says at least your RCS ID in it. I prefer that you have your RCS ID underscore then GSAS 2540, because you'll ultimately share it with me. And I'm going to, when it comes time to grade, I'm going to have just my Unity hub open, and I'm going to type search based on your RCS ID. And hopefully it just pops up because you named it that way. If you named your project Unity Project 1, and I have to like search, I don't know how to associate it with, the user that it came from. There are sometimes ways through organizations, but it's a royal pain. So the project you wind up sharing, be careful. Don't worry about setting up this organization stuff right away. Maybe create a sample project that you just have locally on your machine. Don't worry about sharing that one. That's the one you accidentally name First Unity Project or something. But ultimately, you're going to have one that does have that particular name, so I can find it easily, and an organization associated with it you can put me in, and so on, and that'll be okay. That'll make life easier. Again, here's what, you should have probably seen a screen like this. Now, as you're installing, generally, this is what you're going to see, Microsoft Visual Studio Community 2019, and I'm asking that people install at least the WebGL build support, if not WebGL and Windows build support, not universal Windows platform build support, but Windows build support IL2CPP. Okay. Now, the reason that we include these two is we want to go through the process of what it's like to actually deliver a game to someone, right? Not just develop and run the game on your desktop or me downloading all the code, but to actually deliver it, to put it up on the web somewhere, or to put it in an executable that someone else can then run on their computer. Right. So I like to do this in WebGL specifically because we can put it up on the web and host it at like itch.io. I don't know, is anyone ever familiar with itch.io? It's a great site, particularly for indie games. All sorts of, the quality can be a mishmash. It's not nearly as kind of structured and kind of AAA quality like Steam is. But it's a really fun place. There's all kinds of different assets and things, everything from weird bitsy games to, really nice looking Unity games. And you can set up an account there, set up your own sort of devlog there, publish games. You can keep things like under development with restricted access and so on. And you can just play games. And you can just play games directly within a web browser or a desktop browser from there, right? So if you just want to point someone, and this will come, as you need a calling card to prove your game works as intended to me. So I can just go there and say, oh, okay, for some reason the download didn't work, but look, it plays on itch. And potentially you want to impress your family, friends, potential collaborators, employers, use it as a calling card, start a devlog. The sooner you're kind of aware of kind of what it's like to be pushing stuff out there, the better, because that'll help you land that job you want and so on. So we'll go through that process. So another thing about Unity team collaboration and version control, right? this is going to be our version control system. So the Unity teams, not just so that I can see your games, but if you usually, if your computer, your cat falls asleep on your computer or throws up on your computer, whatever, and your computer gets taken out and or falls down the stairs, if you have been using the Unity team tool and collaboration, it will be backed up to the cloud. So you don't have to worry about, the terrible thing happening to your computer. And then the end of the semester, I'll wind up having to, do a whole incomplete thing. And then you're going to forget about it and you're going to wind up getting the default grade. We don't want to go there. So Unity Teams helps with that as well. It provides a basically offsite backup for you. It also is version control. Now, what that means, if some of you have probably maybe used GitHub as version control. So anyone, show of hands, who's used GitHub? Some have? Okay. The idea behind version control is you can say, okay, let me save the version I have right now and continue working. And then later on, I have a version that, okay, this version's better. Let me check that in. And then you keep working. Here's a version. Let me check that in. But then you might say, well, I broke something. I started coding now, and suddenly something's broken. And I saved, and it's here on my hard drive. I have no idea what changed. What happened? You can go back to other versions. You can say, okay, let me check the version I had last Tuesday because I saved it. Did the bug exist then? Did I introduce the bug between last Tuesday and today? Oh, well, turns out last Tuesday version acts the same. Let me go back to the last Wednesday's version to see, okay, is it there? It's not there. Okay, let me compare the code. Let me see what's different. What have I changed between now and that and so on. So it provides another level of kind of safety net and development fluidity and flexibility. And that's going to come into play a lot more as you start working as parts of teams and things in future classes. And be other tools we introduce and so on. But as far as software development in general goes, you're going to be using various version control systems throughout your school career and professional careers. So for some of you, it'll be our first experience with it. And the nice thing is it's kind of really built in fairly smoothly. Once we get the setup done, actually using it's really easy. It's kind of just a button click. It means work on your project, click that button and submit it. It's very, very painless. Version control provides all sorts of cool benefits. If you want to refer back to this as you're setting this up, once you've played around with just the basics and set up, sort of your local sandbox version, you can refer back to these slides for that. So what I like to see, here's just some reminders. Be careful naming your projects. Use Unity Teams right away. Even if there's projects you're not sharing with me, feel free to use Unity projects or Unity Teams so that you can just back that up. It doesn't have to be something you share. Just use that as a tool in general. As you're updating your project, keep track of things. It's nice. You can prove that, yes, I didn't wait till the last minute to finish this project. I actually was working on it already. And I give credit for that. The sooner you start working on things, the sooner you're, progressing. That's good. Save as often as you can. All right. And so on. So in this course, we talked about a lot of different things. What we're going to cover. If you go back and compare this list to the list I talked about in each of the different projects, you can see this, lots of overlap because these are the things, right? We're going to go from design to implementation of a game. That's the importance of starting with a plan. We're not going to require necessarily rigid design documents because the scope of these projects is going to be fairly small, but sometimes we are going to be using sort of back of the envelope design and planning. We're going to do a little bit of that. And that's going to help us keep on track and keep our ideas pretty solid. We're going to learn some basic game architecture and engine basics. We're going to learn programming and scripting. We're going to learn the basics of math, timing, physics, user interaction, some basic asset management, and asset pipeline. So using graphics and graphics, animation, and audio from other parties. We're going to learn some basic AI and simulation, mostly kind of arcade level AI, nothing really, really fancy, no neural networks and so on. So basic sensing and reacting. We're going to even get into character control, animation and automation, and camera control, and some simple debugging, printout, printf debugging techniques, as well as actual, using the Windows Studio, the Visual Studio debugger to kind of step through code and do a little bit more advanced debugging techniques. We're getting into good programming practices and collaborating and some object-oriented programming and so on and so on. Oh, and I always forget, this is a new topic. There is going to be one additional thing. In the past, we've had just projects, but now introducing, especially because of the whole remote nature of the class, there's going to be one participation quiz. If you've diligently read through the syllabus, you see this weird thing called this participation quiz. It's basically to make sure that you have been awake and paying attention in class and doing the work on your projects yourself. It should be a breeze, right? It's going to be simple questions about concepts, all right? Why did we use this? What would we do that for? What is the relationship between an object and a component? When would I use a prefab versus using a scriptable object? So if you have just cut and pasted code from the web, these are going to be hard things because you're not going to really be understanding what you did. But if you have, paid attention, gone through, done it yourself, the quiz should be, you shouldn't have to stress out over the quiz. Right? So it shouldn't be a problem. It's really just, it's not going to be implement this, write this math. I'm going to test you on, do a cross product and do a, nothing like that. It's mostly going to be kind of conceptual things that, as long as you've kind of gone through things and paid attention, it should be pretty straightforward. All right. And that's that. That's today. I'm hoarse from all the talking I've done today. Any questions? So, LMS, you've all got links to that. Discord, obviously, we all know where that's coming from. I'm going to be posting the YouTube links. So that's where that's going to be coming from. We'll just sort of generally meet at this same time, start to, use Discord as our lobby a little bit before 2:30, and then we'll get there. Let's see, the syllabus. Like I said, if you go to the content portion of LMS, you'll find in there under content, log in here. Where are my courses? This is all kind of crazy new. We'll go to here is us, I think. And our first announcement under content, there should be lecture notes and materials. So here's today's lecture. There will also be a link to this video in there as well, if you want to go back and look at anything. Or if you want to check out the syllabus with schedule, that's there. And kind of the breakdown, you'll see that the second two projects are worth more than the first two projects, and a little bit of talk about, kind of housekeeping about assignments and whatnot. Okay. And the important part, the schedule at the end. We all good? That tied us over till Friday. Nothing really to worry about other than, try to get Unity installed on your machine. Create just a template project that you're going to work on at first on your, just to kick the tires, make sure things are running. There are tons and tons of resources if you want to look around and, get a jump on things, feel free. But ease into the semester, shall we, I guess, right? Contact, send me a direct message anytime. Feel free to keep the Discord channel as lively as you like. I'll have to put a good spot to post all the latest dank memes. Forgot an area for that. We have some good sections on there like, oh my gosh, how did they do that? So if you have some kind of technique in a game that you want to see, if you haven't already seen that, it's like, oh, there was a weapon. How did this weapon, how did this particular thing work in that game? We'll do that. Definitely make sure to update your introductions, and we can always add new topics and things like that as well. But that should do it for today, I think. More than enough. Any questions? Yes? No? Okay. Loaded question here. All right, I'm going to do a poll. Everybody good? All right, I'm going to stop all the streams, and I'll be hanging out for a little while longer. And we'll take it from there. Thank you very much, and glad to have you all, and we'll keep going. Don't expect a tie next time.